Bentornati, and welcome to Dwarf Fortress for Beginners, the series in which I teach you how to play Dwarf Fortress using mostly the in-game tutorials and guides. In this episode we are gonna take a look at bins, bags and barrels, but really this is gonna be about your stockpiles. So before we even read the in-game guide, I want to give you a couple of really important pieces of advice when it comes to managing your stockpiles. If during the initial interactive tutorial you did as told, you should have a central stockpile set up like this, a stockpile that is set to accept all. The same tutorial though says later you may want to customize your stockpile by clicking on them and pressing the custom button to forbid certain categories, like refuse for example. A separate refuse stockpile is a good idea to keep your fortress clean. Now, if you didn't move your refuse away from your main stockpile, do it now. The reason is there is a very important piece of information that this tutorial is not totally clear about. The decay rate of all the items stored in a stockpile that accepts even just one type of refuse is dramatically increased. I published a short that shows in real time just how low durability items like cloth and clothes will literally rot away and disappear from your stockpile in a matter of days. So what you have to do is select your stockpile, click on custom, and make sure that the refuse category is totally disabled. For example, if it's like this, you click on it and click on none over the central column. As soon as you change that, the decay rate of your items is gonna go back to normal. Then at this point, if you also want to move the refuse outside of the fortress so that it looks cleaner, you can go to the surface and create a refuse stockpile like this one. How is this made? Just for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna make a new stockpile, click on accept, and then you simply click on refuse. This is a refuse stockpile just like this one, so I don't need a duplicate, I'm gonna remove it. In order of importance, the second tip is create separate stockpiles for wood and stone. As your fortress expands, you're going to have thousands upon thousands of stone boulders, and a single woodcutter can flood your fortress with logs in a few minutes. Now you could keep expanding your main stockpile, but not only mining away to make space for it generates even more stone, a larger stockpile will generate more work for your dwarves. Every single empty space in your stockpile is a job waiting to be completed. So if you're wondering why it is that important tasks never get worked on, check your creatures tab. There's a good chance most of your workforce is currently hauling stone and wood around for no good reason. My advice is to make separate stockpile for wood and stone, preferably put them close to the workshop that make use of these resources and keep them contained. Keep them a reasonable size, of course relative to the amount of work that you need to do. For example, in this case, what I would do is view the stockpile, and I would cut away a piece of this stockpile. Let's say something like this. And then in this space here, I can go and create separate stockpiles. One I will dedicate to stone, and another one I will dedicate to wood. If I wanted to further customize it, I could get in the stone one and customize and say, in here I want the kinds of stone that I will be using to create furniture, and for example not necessarily ore to be smelted into metals. So metal ores? None of that. Economic? No thank you. Other stone, yes. Clay? We never even considered making pottery yet, so only the other stone will be in here. Also, remember that stone boulders are really heavy. So while carrying those boulders, dwarves will move extremely slowly. That is, unless they're using a wheelbarrow. To make sure that your haulers will make use of a wheelbarrow, click on your stone stockpile, attribute stockpile, click on the barrel icon and make sure that at least one wheelbarrow is assigned. If you want, you can allow for more wheelbarrows to be used in a single stockpile, but remember that as you started the game, you only had one available, so it's probably a good idea now to get in your carpenter's workshop and request a few more wheelbarrows. Oh, and of course, I almost forgot, you gotta get into your general stockpile and disable old stone and wood from here. And if you find yourself in a situation similar to this one, where all the tiles are currently occupied, if you want to restructure your stockpiles, it's a good idea if you can, for example, temporarily give a little bit more space to at least one of them, so that at least a few of these items can be moved, making space for the items that actually need to be in there. So let's resume and let's see if our dwarves can start doing a little bit of cleanup in here. Okay, it looks a little bit better, but I noticed a dwarf hauling a stone boulder manually, and that must be because in this general store I still have the wheelbarrow enabled, but the thing is, since I do not want stone in here, I can totally disable wheelbarrows in this stockpile, so that wheelbarrow in here, whatever it is, can be moved into the stone stockpile. Alright, here it is, see? This is my wheelbarrow. Now, if this all comes to a standstill, don't worry, the solution is going to arrive shortly. So let's move to the meat and potato of this episode, the next in-game guide, which is bins, bags, and barrels. If you find that your stockpiles are filling up too fast, you can create room by building bins, barrels, and bags. Barrels are used to store food, bags are used to store seeds, and some other things like sand, and bins hold just about everything else except from furniture, wood, and boulders. The carpenter's workshop is the best place to make the lightweight bins and barrels, but they can also be made at the stoneworker's shop and the metalsmith's forge. Bags are created at the clothier's shop or the leatherworks. Okay, so there's a lot in here. From the point of view of this guide, it's a little bit early to get into metalsmithing, but when it comes to clothing and leather, we can definitely do something about that. So let me arrange things so that we can have a clothier workshop and a leather works. So we want to go into workshops, clothing and leather, clothes, and we place one down, and then again workshops, clothing and leather, leather. Alright, at this point we have all the necessary workshops to make both bins, barrels, and bags. Let's start with the bags. Bags are used to store seeds, leaves, sand, sugar, and other such small items. Most notably, bags will store up to 100 seeds of the same type. You can easily create a bag out of leather, clicking on the leatherworks, add new task, just look for bag, make a leather bag. Just as easy as that. If you want to make something out of cloth, there's a little bit more complexity in that the clothier's shop wants you to understand that there's 3 different types of cloth. Now the first menu here relates to cloth that comes from plant. So that's going to be your pigtail cloth, cotton, jute, all that stuff. Silk comes from spider silk, and yarn is everything that comes from wool of various animals. As you start the game, you should have a little bit of a pigtail cloth, so it's in the first menu. So make a cloth bag, it's gonna make some pigtails bag. Let's unpause. Somebody should very quickly come in here, and here we have Inod is making a cloth bag. In fact, they have pigtail cloth in here. In here instead, some yak leather, and Adil is making a leather bag. Anyway, unless you already collected either a lot of fruit or a lot of plants from the surface, you should have quite a few bags. Now let's take a look at what is one of the main uses for bags. Bags store seeds. I strongly encourage you to have a dedicated stockpile close to your farm plots so that you can have all the seeds readily available. Take this one for example. A seed stockpile starts as a food stockpile that is then later customized so that you can get in food, selects initially none, then seeds, and all seeds. This way, this stockpile is gonna, of course, hold all the seeds and none of the other food categories. At the same time, if you have another stockpile that can have food in it, you wanna get in there, click on custom, click on seeds, and say none of these seeds. Now, where are those seeds? We can see no bag here. Those bags of seeds are inside a seed barrel. A barrel can hold up to 10 bags of seeds, with each bag holding up to 100 seeds. So basically, unless you are using more than 10 different varieties of seeds, a single tile with a barrel and 10 bags can hold up to 1,000 separate seeds. I do, however, encourage you to make this particular stockpile a little bit bigger, especially because maybe if you wanted to grab a few plants from the outside, or if you gathered fruit, well, all of those are gonna have their own seeds. It is also worth noting that bags are gonna be needed if you want to process your quarry bushes into quarry bush leaves, which can be used for cooking, which is something that happens at the farmer's workshop. The farmer's workshop is under workshops. Guess what? Farming. Farmers. You can make that out of anything you want. And in here, should you have quarry bushes or other plants that produce leaves, you can click on process plant to bag. And as you can see, somebody brought a quarry bush and a pigtail bag. And they are now gonna pluck all the leaves from there and they're gonna store them in the pigtail bag. There you go. Now we have a quarry bush leaves pigtail bag. It's got 5 quarry bush leaves. Now, we mentioned barrels. Barrels are also a container that is used in your stockpiles. And as you started the game, you had quite a few barrels already. Some of them had some food in them, some of them had some drinks. A barrel can hold either a single stack of a drink or several items of either meat, fish, plants, or prepared meals. If we take a look at my ingredients stockpile, in here there's just a ton of mussels. Then what do we have? This is an entire yak's worth of gory bits, and then other mussels and cave lobsters, and then plants. A whole lot of plants. So, should your food stockpile start to become a little bit cluttered, like for example in this case I see some mussels and some meat, you can try crafting more barrels. Barrels can be made out of wood at the carpenter's workshop or metal at the forge. Metal barrels are, however, pretty heavy, and heavy barrels will result in longer hauling times. Should you experience problems getting procuring wood for barrels, you can try making large pots instead. Pots are made at the crafts workshop, both out of wood and stone. Let's try something like that. Add a new task, rock, and let's look for rock pot. I'm gonna make a few of these. Dwarves will use large pots in place of barrels for almost anything, with the exception being just a few crafting recipes. What they will be able to do though is bring the pots in your food stockpile, and at some point we should see some of our dwarves come in here and actually store something in them. There you go, this is now a meat pot, and there is no meat on the ground anymore. Alright, we have bags, we have barrels, we have pots. Now bins. Bins are amazing. Again, they can be made of several different materials, but wood is gonna be lighter. Let's get to the carpenter's workshop and add a new task for wooden bin. I'm gonna order 7 of them. At this point, most of the bins have been crafted, but they are not yet being used. Why is that? Well, for the sake of theatrical effect, I accessed my general store's settings and I temporarily disabled the use of bins. So let me come in here again and say that I actually want 7 bins to be allowed in here. Now let's see what happens. Alright, the bins are coming in. And the goods are getting in the bins. It's happening. Okay, look at that. Just a little bit later, the stockpile is now nearly empty. Why is that? Because all of our goods are now neatly arranged in our bins. Oh, this is the gem bin. Look at this. Bins not only can store dozens of items at a time, but they also categorize them. The first item that gets into a bin dictates what kind of category of items that bin is gonna store. So this one, for example, is a leather bin. This instead is a weapon bin, and all our weapons and tools like hatchets, picks are in there. On average, a stockpile that uses bins will occupy around 10 times less space than a stockpile where everything is just on the ground. So now I can even allow myself to reduce the area of this stockpile to better fit into this section of the fortress. And I'm gonna also do something else. I'm gonna go in here in custom, and I'm gonna say that furniture, which is the third category that actually cannot fit into any bin, I'm gonna say furniture is not allowed in here. I'm gonna make a separate stockpile for furniture specifically. And now I'm gonna say the goods are gonna be in there. That should be enough. Accept. This is still our general stores. I want to make sure that the number of bins allowed is 7. Then I'm gonna make a separate stockpile. I'm gonna put it here. I'm gonna click on accept, and this is gonna be a furniture stockpile. I'm even gonna name it furniture stockpile. There it is. Now let's give the dwarves a chance to move all these items, and let's see how much time will this take. It actually takes very little time, because the dwarves will take the entire bin and they will move that instead of every single item. At this point, I can already hear some of you go, "Listless Onion, but I do want to make a larger stockpile where I put all the stone, because I don't like to see all these stone boulders littered all over the place." Well, I actually have an answer for that. Because you see, these boulders don't really hurt anybody. Like, dwarves can totally walk all over them. If you don't like to see them, you can open the last menu in here and click on the hide item tool. You click on this, select all of this, just make sure not to select items that you're more interested in, and voila! The stone disappeared. If you are unsure whether you hid something or not, you can click on this again, click on the I button, so the remove hidden designation, and now you can see everything, and you can even select everything, and now everything is visible again. Using this tool, you can have a very pretty and very clean looking fortress, and at the same time you will avoid overstressing your workers with excessive hauling. Alright, so we discussed and demonstrated the extreme usefulness of containers, so bags, barrels, pots and bins, as well as the utility for wheelbarrows. Together with a smaller stone stockpile will totally simplify the holding of stone, and all the other containers are useful for storing stuff. Now, let's talk about troubleshooting. Unfortunately, the use of containers can lead to some unfortunate situations. Let me set up in here an example of something that could happen to you. Alright, so look at this situation. I now have a separate stockpile specifically for weapons. I just selected the weapons category in here, and no other stockpile in all my fortress can accept weapons. So in this bin in here, I have both copper spears, battle axes, maces, and copper picks, and multiple of each. Now, let's imagine that for some reason we decide to store copper picks closer to our mines, but the weapons we want to store maybe closer to our military barracks. So one way to achieve that would be, for example, to come in here and completely delete this stockpile. And then, of course, in here, I'm gonna do something that doesn't make any sense because I'm in the kitchen, but I'm just simulating this situation. So I'm gonna make a stockpile in here. Click on accept. I'm gonna say this is weapons, but more specifically, you know what? Weapons, none of this. Just give me the pickaxes, okay? So I'm gonna name it picks. This is the picks stockpile. Also, for some reason, I decide to allow no bin in here. And then I do the same, let's say in here, which is, in this example, is supposed to be closer to, I don't know, where the warriors are training. And I say, this is the weapons. And I say, yes, weapons. And then I customize and say, you know what, all the weapons, but excluding the picks. And also in here I say, you know what, no bins. I want all the weapons clearly visible, right? And let's see what happens when I unpause. So this bin is still in here, right? It's not it's not forbidden, it's not in a weird status, it's just sitting in the middle of the fortress with all our weapons in it. But nothing is happening. Nobody is hauling these goods out of this bin and in one of these. But you may think, okay, they are in the bins, maybe they want to store the entire bin. So let's see, I go in here and I say, okay, you can have a bin, but if I'm gonna say that, I need to say also in here, okay, you can have a bin. The problem is, this bin has both weapons and picks. If my prediction is correct, still nothing is gonna happen. The dwarves will be absolutely confused as to what they should do. I don't know if this is exactly the intended behavior, but the way I'm thinking through this is that when items are stored in a bin, they are on a different priority level, so to speak. So even though this situation would call to separate these items into different stockpiles, this cannot happen. Nor the dwarves want to take this entire bin in here because there are picks in here which are disallowed. Right? If I look in here, no picks, but there are picks in here. Nor do they want to do that in here, of course, because only picks are allowed in here. Nor, most importantly, do they want to manually get the items out of the bin. Okay? Now, I created this situation very artificially, but believe me, it happened to me also in the old versions multiple times and for all kind of different reasons. You end up in a situation where one of your containers, be it a bin or a pot or a barrel, is just sitting there and nobody seems to care about it. So, how do we fix it? What I'm gonna show you now, it's a trick that 100% can reset this situation. So, we're going to zones. I'm going to create a garbage dump zone. I'm going to create a 1x1 garbage dump zone in here. Then I'm gonna click on here in the designate item menu, and I'm gonna click on the designate items for dumping. I'm gonna draw a rectangle that has the bin inside. As you can see now, not only the bin is designated for dumping, but also all the items in it, and that's important. I can even go ahead and remove the dumping designation on the bin, because it's not the bin that I'm interested in, it's the weapons. So, when I unpause, we should immediately see people realizing, oh, those weapons, they need to be dumped, right? So now this thing is, well, almost empty. We need just another wave. All right, would you look at this? Now that the bin is empty, they realized, okay, an empty bin can be in here. And all the weapons are in here. Now, have we destroyed these weapons? Absolutely not. They are in here. They are simply, if I click on one, they are simply forbidden. We can go back in here and just reclaim them in mass, just like this. Let's see what happens now. Oh, now they sort them out, right? Look at this. All the copper picks are in here. And if I were, for example, to re-enable some of these bins over here, and if I were to come in here and say, you know what, weapon stockpile, you can also have a bin, right? That was already set, actually. Now a dwarf is gonna probably realize that one of these bins can be used somewhere else. Let's see, how many does this allow? Only 6. There's 8 in there. Okay, okay. There you go. Now we have a bin in here. And in a few seconds more, now this is a weapon bin. Fantastic. All sorted. Now, in my experience, this is not just a problem with bins. It can happen also for barrels. I'm not sure if that happens for bags, because in bags, nothing is ever mixed. But for all these other things, for barrels and bins and pots, it can happen. You just dump everything elsewhere, then you reclaim it, and everything should sort itself out. Then when you're done with the dumping and the moving, just so you don't create more confusion, you can click on these and you can just remove them. There you go. Done. This technique of dumping in a single square, guess what? You can even use it, garbage dump, one by one, accept. You can absolutely use it to clear out a space. See? Again, I don't like all this stone in here, and I don't want to use the hide button, even though the hide button is even better, because the hiding doesn't require any labor. But see? Like, designated the stone to be dumped in a single place, especially if this tile is not very far away. It's super quick, it's super easy. So let's say now I want to remove this zone, absolutely, because otherwise it's going to create some confusion. Let's say if I go downstairs and I see, hey, I don't like that there's boulders here, okay? This feels messy. What I would do in this situation, I could either go in here and hide, or if I don't want to hide those things, again, garbage dump in a corner or anywhere else, but again, close by. I don't want to have dwarves slowly hold these boulders like 500 tiles away, because that totally defeats the point. It's gonna be close by, but it's gonna be in a place where I think it makes sense. And I'm gonna say, dump these items. You wanna be careful not to dump your chairs or beds or stuff like that, okay? And then I select these. I select these, and I want to select manually in this case, because I don't want to dump the wine barrel. I want to dump this borax thingy. I select this. Now, my dwarves immediately understand. There you go. Everything is tidy. And then, of course, I still want to eventually use these, so I can click on claim. I reclaim them. And then, since this was a temporary garbage dump, I can remove the zone, and I'm done. There you go. So, now you know absolutely not everything there is to know. There is much more that we could say about tricks for moving stuff around, and especially about stockpiles. Stockpiles can be really, really tricky, really complicated, to the point that some players don't even want to bother making stockpiles for some reason. But this should at least get you going. You should have at least some tools to troubleshoot your stockpile and to make sure that your fortress and your workshops stay clean. That said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next episode. Alla prossima!